Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our February membership meeting here at the Virginia Train Collectors Association. So I want to welcome all of you in the audience and all of you watching on Facebook Live at home. So we have a great presentation for us tonight. I'll introduce our speaker. Our speaker is Jeff Sessa, and he grew up in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and at 19 he hired on with CSX as a conductor and spent 15 years there with CSX and worked his way up to a CSX locomotive engineer. And then he was left and was hired by Amtrak as an engineer, and he currently runs the auto train from Lorton, Virginia down to Florence, South Carolina and back. So, and he has, his wife is here with him tonight and a special guest from, where's he from? Alaska. So all the way from Alaska, we got somebody at a VTCA meeting. So sweet. All right. So with that, let's give a warm welcome to Jeff Sessa. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Just want to warn you. This presentation, I've given it to some friends before. There are a lot of dates and facts and figures, and I just want you to know there is a test at the end, and I don't grade on a curve, so please study hard. And I can't do much better than that introduction of all that's true, believe it or not. I grew up in Gaithersburg, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C. in Montgomery County, Maryland. Fell in love with trains at an early age, hired out with CSX. It was all I ever wanted to do was work on the railroad, became an engineer. And after 15 years at CSX, I had enough of that. And I went to Amtrak a little over 3 years ago, and like it said in the introduction, I currently work the auto train. So that's me, it's my dad, and this is my grandfather on my mom's side. And these fellows are pretty much responsible for this like obsession and passion. They dragged me everywhere as a kid to look at all this stuff, so that's kind of where I wound up. So thanks to them for fostering this passion and this interest. And this was taken on an excursion we rode behind the 611 when it came back out in like 2015, and we rode it out of Manassas, and it was like a big to-do. And I went, and my best friend went, and brought his dad, and a whole bunch of us. We really did it up. So that's kind of like a little bit of background on me, and there you go. That last picture, I will say, so this was on my 27th birthday. We had come out of the bar, me and my friend, and we found this lovely little CPL door signal on at Piedmont, West Virginia, on the mountain sub, and I'm expressing my gratitude towards it. So this is a small image, but it's the only one I could really boost and steal off the internet to talk about what this show's going to be about. So I grew up in Gaithersburg, which was on the B&O, and the B&O initially built west out of Baltimore. Baltimore, hun, the goes and the crabs and the natty bow and all that. Yeah, so they built west out of Baltimore through the Patapsco River Valley, over the Maryland Piedmont, and west because they wanted to reach Wheeling and the Ohio River. And then after they got that all figured out, they said, well, let's build the Washington, D.C. It is the capital after all, so they built the Washington branch. Everything's good. This did not exist yet. So all these bedroom communities outside of Washington, D.C., they kind of looked around and said, well, these other towns and everything, they're really benefiting from the building of this railroad. We'd like in on this. So they went to the B&O and they said, we'd really like you to build a railroad west out of Washington, D.C. through Georgetown, hit all of our towns, and meet up with your original main line somewhere out that way. And the B&O said, no, you're not going to do that. So all these prominent townsfolk and business leaders got together and they chartered the Metropolitan Railroad. And so they got together, they pooled their resources. The only problem was that they really didn't know how to build a railroad. They were businessmen, but this railroad technology was like pretty new stuff. So, they would do stuff like move piles of dirt around to keep the charter afloat and, stand around and pretend like they were, working and stuff. But other than kind of profiling them out and doing some surveying out, they never laid any track or anything. And then this thing called the Civil War happens, and the B&O is like, man, we really could have used the route west out of Washington, D.C. Really would have been helpful. And so they actually bought the charter that belonged to the Metropolitan Railroad, and it became the Metropolitan branch of the B&O. And so leaves Washington, D.C., it again crosses the Maryland Piedmont, and it meets up with the old main line at Pointed Rocks. And so these are all the communities. Gaithersburg is here, and so that's where I grew up. And what this show is really about is the specific area that I spent a lot of time walking and rail fanning and eventually running trains over. So the Metropolitan Subdivision is obviously a lot longer than the focus of this show. The show's focus is primarily on like a 2-mile long stretch, and it features slides that I've taken, either myself or friends that have taken, or slides that I've purchased and scanned, and then I've kind of put them alongside pictures that I've taken. And it's not always a one-for-one match, and there's a lot of side stories and anecdotes that kind of float this thing along. So that's kind of the basis of the show. This is Francis Cassett Clopper, or Frankie C to his friends. This guy was a prominent Gaithersburg businessman, and he had a mill, he had a farm, and some other business interests. And he was primarily the head guy when it came to the Metropolitan Railroad and the charter. He had some friends in the Maryland legislature, which helped, again, with the formation of the charter. Well, after the charter was purchased by the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, the B&O is purchasing parcels of land so they can build their railroad, and they're buying up the land and yada, yada, yada. They get up to Clopper's place, and they go, okay, let's talk turkey. How much you want? I don't want any money. The terms of him letting the B&O have access to his land was he wanted a siding built into his backyard so that he could take the finished product from his mill business and his farm and ship things and receive things. And so it's pretty cool. Till this day, there is still a signal called Clopper's where the B&O went through his property. So that still exists today. So he was very instrumental in the formation of what is today the Metropolitan Subdivision of CSX. So we'll start here at a place called Durwood, called the Durwood Dip. It might be a little hard to see, but there's actually a slight little dip in the track about there. This is a 1984 shot of an eastbound Maryland DOT commuter train coming through Durwood Dip, taken from the Redland Road overpass. We're looking west. Shady Grove Road is over there. We've got Montgomery County with all their accoutrement over here. We have the sand domes for the salt trucks and all that good stuff. The Department of Liquor Control is there. We have the western terminus of the red line of the DC Metro that was completed in 1984. So this is just opened in the scene. This is a scan from the cover of an American Railway Engineering 1986 issue. So it's pretty cool. If you look over here, this is Sears, and Sears used to get cars, appliance cars, and all growing up and looking for photos, I've never seen evidence of cars spotted there. So I've always been like on the hunt for it, and I still have never ever seen cars parked in there. Later on, when I hired out, I worked with a trash train that originated here. There's a waste transfer station here, and one day we go to leave, and I find my exit of Sears Siding, which is here, blocked. A freight train had to set out a bad order car, and they shoved it on in there and blocked us. And so I'm thinking, well, how are we going to get out? Well, through some creative maneuvering, we split the engines apart, and we grabbed the bad order car, and we shoved it up into the former Sears siding. So I can say I spotted a car at Sears, even though I've never seen a picture of one. Now, this picture was taken before the Metropolitan Subdivision was re-signaled and reconfigured. It used to be signaled in bi-directional 251 territory, which is, you can think of that as like right-handed running. Like, if you go westbound, you're on track 1. If you're eastbound, on track 2. Later on, we'll talk about a little bit more in detail. Later on, there was an interlocking added here where you could cross tracks, and the Metropolitan Sub was signaled in both directions because they wanted to add more commuter train traffic. That was circa 1993 that occurred. So here we are, mid-1980s. That's the post office. The Sears is no longer there. It's a CarMax, so you can go there and buy a car, but not see any trains. My grandparents lived in Durwood, which is like kind of in this area here. So it was not unusual for like my grandmother and myself to walk out onto this bridge and spend the evening looking at trains. So if you go to 2014, I'm out here with an engineer friend of mine, Al Moran. We walked out to watch some trains come by, And this is a eastbound U-848. And what makes this neat is U-848 is a coal train that originated on the Western Maryland Railway at Matiki, out on the Thomas subdivision. And the ebb and flow of coal meant that for long periods of time, trains weren't loaded at Matiki, and then they loaded for a long, long time. And then just recently, in the past couple of weeks, they announced they're going to close the loadout. So Matiki coal trains on the Western Maryland are done. I did get called for several of these in my CSX career, and I was always very excited. You know, it'd be like 3 in the morning, I'd be on the engine, and I'd be telling my conductor, this is a Western Maryland train, it originated in Matiki. And he's like, that's great, I do not care. So this again is from the Redland Road overpass. Now we've, standing on the other side, but we still have the metro station. We have Sears siding poking out that would go over there to Sears and the trash plant. Lead locomotive CSX T5000. It was one of the Spirit of Diversity painted CW60s. This engine met its fate in October 2016. Jeff Bethea was coming west out of Philly with the 193 and ran a stop signal, and they had head-on collision with the eastbound grain train. None of those guys ever came back to work again. So no more 5000 and no more Matiki coal trains, unfortunately. This is a picture taken in about 2014. So when I say that there's then and now, it's kind of like then and then, because obviously this is not now, then, now. If we go down to track level and we turn around, we can see this commuter train at the Durwood Dip signals. Now, by this point in 1994, the track is signaled both directions, so we're looking at, you can see there's signals on both tracks for westbound traffic. The interlocking is behind the photographer. Sears siding is kind of like down in here in the shadows. The last couple pictures were taken from Redland Road overpass, which is right about in there, you can see. So this is a westbound marked commuter train, fall of '94. It's the last of the covered wagons pulling the commuter trains before newer power arrived. And this signal is in my backyard. It is not up, but I commandeered it. I stole it from the trash bin. What's that? So now we're still at Durwood. The last picture was taken, of course, standing here facing this way. We're looking at an eastbound. This is the trash train. So we have stopped. Engineer Corbin Banks has let me off. I've climbed down. I've said, say cheese, taken the picture after lining the split rail for a move. Now he's going to pull the train by so I can line the switch and we'll shove back up into Sears. This is circa January 2011. I usually did take a camera to work, but I didn't always use it, and I kind of regret it because I'm not going to see bright future painted SC40s anymore. Yeah. This job stinks now. They cut the mileage on it. It goes on duty at a weird time. It used to be a really good job. The engineer that I worked it with, Corbin Banks, I used to wave to him as a kid. And eventually I went and I had enough seniority that I could hold that job as his conductor. And he was a great man. I loved working with him. He was like my favorite engineer I worked with. And you'll see him later on in the show. So there we are at Durwood. Say cheese. All right, time to get back to work. We had a change in dispatchers when I was working the job, and the dispatcher that when I started working the job, Terry George Nickerson, old school, old head dispatcher, right? And we'd tone him up, and he'd let us out in between the MARC trains. He'd actually let us scoot through. Now we would give him a good move, move on out, and he could segue us between the MARC trains so we could get out of the way. When he retired, we got a new dispatcher, and she was like, you're going to wait for the last MARC train and many others. So I figured, why not get comfortable? So I commandeered a chair from my parents' deck, and I would keep it in the woods and flip it upside down, and then when it was time for us to open up, because I was at the rear of the train and I would have to wait for other trains to pass, I would bring out my little Adirondack chair, park it at the derail so I could be in position when the last train would go by and I could at least have somewhere nice to sit. Sorry, Mom. Again at Durwood Dip, this is the westbound Capital Limited. Again, we can see the interlocking, put in the crossovers now, so this is like fall of 1994. Sears siding is back here now. Redland Road still the same place. For the life of me, looking at this on a big screen, why does it look like there's like a yellow lab in the fireman seat? I don't know if it's like my eyes playing tricks on me, but it looks like a dog is like half running the train. This is the Capital Limited before the Superliners came. It still had the mail business, had the dome car, F40 PHs, which are cool. That's what I grew up watching. Everyone loves the F40 PH. Durwood dip. There's the dip. Qualified yet? Okay, you ready to take a train?
Yeah.
Speed up to 2013. Here's me standing there at Durwood. Now the lovely B&O signals are gone. Now we've got these fugly safe train signals. We've got a westbound Capital Limited, PO29 coming. Even now the old baggage cars are gone. It's got a Dash 8 hiding back there. Those are pretty much gone off of the road train. So even this picture, even though it's a little bit newer, is still, well, you're not going to see that anymore. So I was down here, kind of like just took out the telephoto lens. Oh, shoot, a westbound. I spent a lot of time walking around Durwood. I would just walk down there and watch trains. No one like really bothered me. In fact, when I was a teenager, I'd be watching the trash train and they'd say, "Come on up," and I'd ride around with them as they put the train away. So if we move a little bit further west, we come to the hamlet of Washington Grove. And now Washington Grove was founded as a retreat for Washington, D.C. Methodists. And they set up a camp and a retreat, and it became like an unincorporated town, if you will. So we've moved just a little bit west, maybe about, I don't know, half a mile, if that, west from where we were standing previously. This is 1972. Walter Shop's got a westbound B&O freight train coming around the curve. You see this very busy looking code line over here. We got a nice SD40, GP9. And despite being in the middle of Gaithersburg, it's a very pastoral scene. It's very woodsy and bucolic, and the as they say in the Western Maryland book, the scenic splendor of the line was readily apparent. Washington Grove is a place I spent an awful lot of time at, which you will see in the upcoming pictures. There was a typical brick station here that went away a long time ago. It is still currently a stop for the commuter trains. So there is a platform, and it's a little bit nicer now, although I do remember growing up, it was a little bit more easygoing, just little things. The parking lot was gravel and not paved, just little things like that. The code line survived until the Metropolitan Subdivision was 261 in the early 90s, so it really was cleared out until fairly recently, and then over time, without the presence of the code line, the trees have encroached, and you'll see more of that too in these upcoming photographs. If we move to 2011, we've got a westbound Alderac train, kind of a similar situation. Westbound leader, SD40, on the head end there. You can see without the code line, we've got a little bit of brush encroaching on the right of way. It didn't dawn on me until after I took the picture and looked it up. Lead engine here is the 8437, which is the former Western Maryland 7495. So that was cool. That number board right there is in my basement. With the chunk missing out of 3. They rebuilt this engine into something else, and so a friend of mine was able to procure all the old number boards, and he gave them to all his friends. So I got the 8437 because it was a Western Maryland unit. Again, 2011, you don't really think about SD40 and SD50. Well, all that stuff's gone. You'll never see this pulling a train again. But again, a very similar scene here at Washington Grove, circa 2011. We'll look at the Capital Limited again. This is westbound 29 with the former GO Transit GP40TC on the head end there. This is about, I think this is September of 1993, this shot was taken. Again, we still have the mail cars on the head end, the dome cars, the superliners haven't arrived yet. All very fun. Everyone loves the GP40TC. That's your Amtrak picture. And then we have the new Amtrak passenger with engine 54. Where are you? A truncated version of the Capital Limited, more growth, and J.C. Zuna as the engineer, he also came from CSX, but he went to Amtrak in 2011. I've known John a long time. This was an engine I had when I came to Amtrak. It seemed like engine 54 would follow me around a lot. Nice engine, and I'd always make that joke in the crew room, engine 54, where are you? No one would get it. I don't know what their problem is, So we've looked at a freight train, we've looked at the Capital Limited. Well, let's look at a commuter train. So now we're back in 1981 looking at a commuter train at Washington Grove. I believe that's an FO Day dump truck, and I remember those running around. Here we have another MDOTF unit, and I always like this paint scheme. It's the Maryland Department of Transportation doing their best Oriole impression with the orange and the black and silver. I always thought that was an attractive paint scheme. At this point, Mark, or Maryland DOT, they were kind of short on equipment, so they would lease cars from different places, including cars that had served previously on the Chessie Steam Special. The B&O actually sold a consortium of rail fans that had gotten together under the name Railroad Passenger Cars. They sold them passenger cars and then leased them back to the B&O. I think it was just like a giant Ponzi scheme because they kept showing up on these trains. So this is 1981. We've got the commuter station here, the train's pulling in, and we will go to a little bit more of a current shot. And now you can see the growth is really, it's really encroaching on the right of way. So this was last summer. I spent some time up there, went home, had a nice afternoon to take some pictures. And so now we've seen a freight train at Washington Grove, we've seen the Capital Limited at Washington Grove, and we've seen this here MARC train. Lucky number 13 on the head end. If you're superstitious, here's what a MARC train looks like today at Washington Grove.
What's that second car in that consist? What's that?
It's just a single level. These
Just
are
a single level?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I believe in '86 is when these came out, and they've been slowly replaced with these Bombardier, or however you pronounce it, bi-levels. There were older MARC cars that were running until these came. I think they're real. I think these actually might be up for sale by the state, for all I know. I think they really are trying to get rid of them. They're built in Japan. There's really cool pictures of them, like on ships. And then they went for like final assembly, I think in Chicago. I'm not sure. But yeah, they're Japanese cars. If we turn around the other direction and we face west, this is the view of Washington Grove, and it's a pretty cool shot because we can kind of see the Wayne feed in here. Now, my grandfather grew up like down the street, so I remember him regaling me of stories of playing, cowboys and Indians in the feed mill here. The famous humpback bridge, East Deer Park Drive, it's still there. It's a landmark. You've got the nice humpback bridge. My friend Jeff Baldwin took this picture in February 1983. Jeff Baldwin's a pretty cool guy. I was at a bar talking to a young lady, and she's like, "Oh, hey, by the way, you need to meet my friend Jeff." And so, "Oh, hey, nice to meet you." And as he's extending his hand, I see him put his phone away, and I catch a glimpse of his phone, and the screensaver on his phone is like an Alco switcher. And I'm like, "What do you got there?" And he goes, "Well, I was an engineer on like the Keokuk Junction Railway briefly," and I was like, "Oh, that's cool. I work for CSX." And Aaron was like, "All right, I'll see you all later." And I never saw her the rest of the night, but Jeff and I palled around and swapped sea stories, and we're still friends. And he was gracious enough to let me steal this photo that he took of the eastbound Metway local that served the industries along the metropolitan subdivision between DC and Brunswick. That job was originally based out of Washington, D.C., B&O's Eckerd Yard. And then when that closed, Eckington Yard. When that closed, it got moved to Brunswick, and now the job runs out of Brunswick. I model the chassis system, specifically the area that I'm from, and if you model a chassis system, you need lots of coal cars, and you need B&O coal cars, you need Western Rail coal cars, you need C&O coal cars, but according to this, I need an N&W coal car. So,
That's right.
Sorry, honey, the N&W coal cars are coming. A couple insulated box cars back here. There was a couple of beer distributors on the Metropolitan Sub, canned goods distribution, a couple places that did all that stuff. Now, no more. There's absolutely none of it. All the local industry work, gone, done. No more local customers. Because we can't have anything nice. Got a nice little GP9 though. That's kind of cute. So you can still come here to Washington Grove and kind of sort of see the same thing-ish. A little more treed in, more signs, more railings, more fun. Six Flags. The MARC train's coming in here. This looks like P880. So this is the final eastbound MARC train in the morning. We got the nice new Bombardier cars. This nice little shack they put in about 1999 because I guess they figured people were getting sick of standing out in the rain waiting for the MARC train. Spent a lot of time hanging out in that shelter. Spent a lot of time on the platform, and if you hoisted yourself up on this like wooden railing here, you could sight down the track and see the signals at Durwood. And if you didn't have a scanner, or before I had a scanner, that was how you could tell a train was coming. So I spent a lot of time kind of hanging out here. You can sort of see the Wayne feeds structured back here, but it is getting treed in. And this shot was like 2022, so it's fairly recent. Now we're still facing west. We're still at Washington Grove, eastbound train with a couple GP30s. Everyone loves a GP30, except the people that ran them. I like them. This is September 1981. You know, this could also, again, be the Metway local. I'm not really entirely sure, because you do have a matched set of these after all, and you kind of have a very similar consist to that other photo. You've got the insulated boxcar and some miscellaneous coal cars. So here's your GP30 for all you GP30 fans, of which I am one. And if we fast forward, we can see a MARC train in 2015. Similar situation. Now, who's running the MARC train? Does that look like somebody?
Santa Claus.
Yeah.
Santa Claus.
Yeah, Santa Claus is running the MARC train. That's Tom Hires. So always wears Santa Claus outfit around the MARC train, even in the summertime. I worked with him. He was a good guy. He still goes to Timonium, so you'll see him up there. But yeah, he was running the MARC trains too, because up until 2013, the MARC trains on the Brunswick line and the Camden line were crewed by CSX crews, and then CSX for years had been trying to get out of that arrangement. We only want to crew our own trains, so they eventually farmed it out to, I think Bombardier crews the trains now, I'm not sure. So a lot of people elected to stay in commuter rather than come back to freight, which makes sense because, if you've been out on the railroad a while, what do you want to do? You want to ride in the air conditioning and the heat, or do you want to be outside on a freight train? So a lot of those guys just stayed over there with the takeover of the passenger operations. But several people had a choice to make. And a few people did come back to freight. They didn't last very long because, like I said, you've been for 30 years, you've been running a MARC train or taking tickets on a MARC train. You come outside, it's 110 degrees, and they tell you, tie down this 110 car coal train on a hill. It's like you're not really going to stick around for that. So here we have the cab car first, engine on the rear facing west. We're on the west end of the train, Washington Grove. And if we go further west still, we come to Gaithersburg, the actual place. This is 1975-ish. We got the rear of an eastbound train with one of them nice I-12, wagon top cabooses, whatever. They were built, I believe they were all built by the Dino at their Kaiser, West Virginia shops. They might have been built somewhere else too, but I think Kaiser was kind of like the main place. Nothing in Kaiser anymore, it's just a dot on a map, not much else. Got the Granary Road building. This was a big going concern up until the late 1960s. It caught fire like 1,100 times or some crazy thing like that. Finally, 11,000th time they said, we're done, we're not doing this again. So it sat derelict for many, many years, and then eventually in the 1990s it became a commercial space. And there's a couple businesses in there. The bottom has a really nice bar and restaurant. Now it's been through several different additions because the bar owners would either it was a front for drugs or trafficking or whatever. So it's been through like 30 different incarnations. But the food was always good, so whatever. So Gaithersburg, if you look where I'm standing, you've got kind of this berm here. But if you go that way, in reference to the photograph, there's the Gaithersburg City Park. Now, Gaithersburg City Park is where my dad would take my sister and I on weekends to spend time at the park as children. And when you were on the swings or the jungle gym or doing whatever kids do, and you heard that horn in the distance, all the kids would take off running, right? We'd go running across this field to this berm because we want to see the train. And that's all I can remember is just running as fast as I can with all the other kids to the berm to go wave at the train. And the only train that you could not beat to the berm was Capital Limited. If you heard the Capital Limited, you'd be only about halfway across that field before you'd see it just go by. So we're in Gaithersburg, we're looking east, and we're going to continue looking east with a more current addition. So you can see this is what that place is called now, South House Garden. I have not been there yet, but the space should be the same. And since it's a old granary, it's got a nice, really long bar in it, really long, and they got a nice stage. They would have music. It was really nice on the inside. We've got the MARC train arriving, a little bit more treed in. This was 2022, fall of 2022. I was up there taking some pictures. Engine number 22, and it looks like we have a full complement of single level cars. And I don't know if they still even run solid consists of these. Like I said, this is 2022, so this might even be not even how they do it anymore. Not entirely sure. So yeah, it's wild stuff. Now, I found this slide and I really fell in love with it because to me, this is how I remember seeing trains. This is like kind of like the first thing I remember about seeing a train is like this exact view because it's taken along that berm I was talking about. So again, we'd hear the horn and we'd run across the field and we were greeted by this wonderful, wonderful scene. You've got a train coming east, climbing uphill, engines eighth notch, laying sand. You can see the sand, dust. And if you stood on that berm, you were almost kind of eye level with the engineer. So as they crawled by, because they're going up the hill, you could look right in and you could wave right at them. And that's what stuck with me. That's what inspired me to do what I do. So this is a April 1991 picture. The late Tom Byrie took it. Eastbound train, got a nice SD40-2 rebuild head out. Ex-CNO GP39, well, that's good luck. We got a Family Lines BQ23-7, that's really good luck. We got a GP30M back there. So all good stuff, all the good power, all the stuff I wish I could have on the auto train. They won't let me. Gaithersburg did get an I-12 caboose to put on display. That's pretty neat. This RPO, the Southern RPO, I believe belongs to Jim Visline, who is in charge or affiliated with the Norfolk Southern Steam Excursions through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And when NS closed their facilities at Alexandria, Virginia, his RPO wound up here, and I think now it's at Spencer. So if anyone knows for sure, I think it's at the Spencer Museum down there. The wagon top caboose, I got a bone to pick with these people. Gaithersburg traded it for a C&O caboose, but we're on the B&O. Why would you trade a B&O caboose for a C&O caboose? It's sacrilegious, I tell you. So my childhood playground was moved to Hagerstown, where it doesn't belong and has no business. I'm not salty about it. If we move a little bit downwards, we're looking at another eastbound train. This is the Millville Rock Runner, taking stone from Millville, West Virginia, down to like Bladensburg or Benning. When I took my qualifying run as an engineer, it was on the Millville Rock Runner. I didn't have a GP30M though, so I'm pretty upset about that. But if you do look 3 deep, we have an ex-R&P GP40, so that's good, right? We're all R&P buffs here, right? Yeah. Here's that RPO again. Fascinating. There's also another caboose here. Ex-Norfolk Western C31P, C32P, ICC. Like I said, lots of facts and figures in this presentation. You're expected to know all of them. This was also my playground. They did eventually paint it blue with yellow ends, almost like a C&O caboose, but not quite. Very interesting, at least to me. So you've got this former Norfolk and Western caboose. It's living its retirement life here in Gaithersburg. Everything's cool. It also migrated to Hagerstown. Once the museum in Hagerstown had it, they traded it to CSX for the last active former Western Maryland caboose. So this caboose is now active on CSX as a shelving platform. So as far as I know, it's the only former Norfolk and Western caboose that's on CSX. It's kind of a roundabout way to get to where it's going. Usually you will see it between Hagerstown and Hancock. When I worked for CSX, I would always look for it, and every time I pass it, it'd be in the yard someplace, I'd wave at it, shoot it a smile. But it's still out there somewhere doing its thing. And we'll see this caboose make a cameo a little bit later too. The late running Q138, the Baltimore trailer train, when it first got some stacks going on it. Here's our blue and yellow C31 or C32 caboose that's gotten freshly painted. We have a Western Maryland Troop kitchen car that's also at Hagerstown now. We got the freight house. We'll see that a little bit later too. 5936. When I grew up, trailer trains had 4 axles on them, and often they had either B40-2s or B36-7s, or in this case, a B40-8. We all have an opinion about the B40-8. I like them. In fact, I really like this one because I got to run it several times. So this is a really nice photo that my friend Al Moran allowed me to boost. I got permission from him. He took this. This was 1994, 1995, I believe. I don't have a marked date on it. Anyways, 5936 had an interesting history. So Delaware and Hudson Railroad was bankrupt, and the Susquehanna Railroad was court ordered to operate the Delaware and Hudson through bankruptcy. Well, they also didn't have any power. So, long story short, CSX financed new engines so that the Susquehanna could operate the Delaware and Hudson in 1988, which included all these Dash 8s. Well, after the Susquehanna stopped having to operate the Delaware and Hudson because Canadian Pacific purchased it, all the Dash 8s reverted back to their CSX ownership. So 5936 was one of these. It was a cool engine. It was retired, still wearing the Bright Future paint. I'm a horn buff, so I was really interested, and it still had a K5H horn on the roof, D minor chord, really pretty. Love that horn. So 5936, we'll see him in here in just a second again. Eastbound at Gatesburg, kind of a similar situation, but not quite. You know, like I said, it's not 100% on these then and now shots. I believe this was Christmas Eve 2015. This is an early morning MARC train just getting out of town after taking on passengers. If you know me, I'm not a morning person. So the only way I could figure that I was even awake to shoot this is I must have worked the previous night and just gone straight from work to like taking pictures. This does not compute. I would have no reason to be up at like 6:30 in the morning. Again, those single level cab cars, I think those are actually like done ski. I think they're all stored in Brunswick, last I saw. So again, then and now was more like then and then. 5936, like I was talking about in that prior slide, I got to run it a few times. Pretty cool that you get to, see an engine growing up, collect the numbers, if you will, and then get to run the darn thing through your hometown. And that's exactly what I did. Now, if you're from the Federal Railroad Administration, you did not see that video. That too was taken at 3 a.m. and I decided, well, if I'm awake, the whole town should be awake. Hey. But so yeah, 5936 got to run it a few times. Loved that engine. Had a lot of fun with it on that job. So Gaithersburg was actually the top of the metropolitan subdivision. It was the top of the hill. And although westbounds were going uphill, eastbounds really, really had the front of it. The ruling grade is yada percent. I don't know what it is. It's steep. You go slow up it. That's all I know. So even starting in the steam era, eastbound tonnage trains had helpers, and they had helpers that would attach at Brunswick, and they would shove up Barnesville Hill, and they'd come down to Great Seneca Creek, and then they'd shove up again to Gaithersburg. At Gaithersburg, you had a couple of options. In the steam era days, the steam locomotive would detach, and they would Y it. There was a Y just west of Summit Avenue, top, Summit, top. Okay, makes sense. You would Y the steam engine, and you'd hightail it back to Brunswick. Well, diesels, you don't need that because you got probably a back-to-back set of something, and you can just go west, willy-nilly. A couple different ways you can do that, which we'll talk about here. So it didn't matter so much after the metropolitan subdivision was signaled in both directions, and they added interlockings, which made it easier to get helpers, not just helpers, but any train back west. But before that was the case, you got to pull up to one of these things. What do you think the T stands for in that box? Telephone. Called the operator. Operator QN down in Washington, D.C. will tell you how you're going to get back home to Brunswick. So this is a helper set that has shoved an eastbound train. They've cut loose, doors open because the conductor's probably just come back inside from having his head in the telephone box here. And you can go west a couple of different ways. So just beyond the crossing here at Summit Avenue, there's a hand-operated crossover. Don't go looking for it now, it's not there anymore. But prior to Durwood becoming an interlocking, this is how westbound helper sets would cross back over to get right-handed running again. And so the procedure was you call the operator at QN, who via the dispatcher in Camden in Baltimore would relay the instructions to the operator of how they wanted to run the railroad. And you could get permission to open up the hand-throw crossover and cross from track 2 to track 1 to get back right with the current traffic. Now, you can't just open up willy-nilly. You've got to wait a couple of minutes. The electric switch has a mechanism where you unlock the switch and a timer runs. Now, while that timer runs, what it's doing is it's sending signals down to the prior signals so that a train coming west will see a stop signal and not just run plumb into the side of it. Well, let's suppose you don't want to wait 7 minutes. Let's suppose you're in a real hurry, you got to make last call. We all understand that. you have this happen. So in May 1989, the helper set opened up, didn't wait the 7 minutes, and ran straight into the side of the westbound Millville rock runner going back west of Millville. 6044 survived. She only got dinged up a little bit. 6505 survived. This black and white photo is kind of neat. Our next door neighbors growing up were both Montgomery County police officers, and they knew that I liked trains. So one day, Kenny comes over and hands me a stack of photographs and goes, "Here you go." And it was all like the investigation photos from the night of the derailment. So I have a stack of these. I really like this one because it's a really nice shot of the front of the 6044, nice GP40-2. Everyone loves GP40-2. I do. So yeah, it's not supposed to look like that. It's actually supposed to be on the track. Not supposed to, it's a cool shot, but not supposed to look like that. And I do have a couple of slides. So back here, this is the helper set, and they made it through the crossover. You can kind of see that the side of it's tore up. This was the lead unit on the westbound Millville rock runner. Then you had the second and third, and there was also a fourth unit that is out of frame. You can see the remnants of the westbound siding here. 6047, GP40-2. Facts and figures and trivia, I believe that was the first GP40-2 retired by CSX. So I find it very, very fascinating. Here's another shot. You can kind of see the side of this SD50's kind of tore up. The crossover's back here. So they kind of came together and sandwiched together, and the helper set drifted west. The rock runner derailed, obviously. I don't believe there were any injuries. Not 1,000% sure on that. No deaths, luckily. So it's really important that you wait 7 minutes when you open up at the Hanford crossover at Summit Avenue. Let's say that was a little too exciting for you. Let's say you don't want to be in a collision. You could always get paper railroad to return west against the current of traffic. And all that simply means is the train dispatcher up there at Camden in Baltimore would issue a train order to the operator at QN to forward to the crew of the helper set. Because going against the current of traffic, this crew would not have signals to guide them west. So you'd have to get this piece of paper, and this is your authority to occupy the track against the current of traffic. So this is a train order. It's train order number 107, February 9th, 1981, at QN Tower. To C&E, that's conductor and engineer, extra 7603, so that's the engine number, west at Gaithersburg via QN Tower. So we've got, this would be the dispatcher, would be VGR, to the operator QN, copied by the engineer on the 9th at 9:43 a.m. JRC would be the operator. Seems simple enough, but what happened to the 7603 about 8 minutes later? Does anybody know? There's the 7603. The dispatcher neglected to figure out that he had eastbound train 88 already out of Brunswick. And so he wrote an overlapping order with the eastbound. And just east of Germantown in a curve, they met head on. The 7603 never came back to work. That was done. Amazingly, nobody died. But there were some pretty serious injuries. There's actually another locomotive in here. I don't know if you can tell. There's 3 engines on train 88. So this is the cab of the lead eastbound unit. Brakeman on 88, I believe, was Larry Sauerlein, and he retired not too long ago. The brakeman on the helper set was a guy by the name of Donald Greenfield. Now, Donald Greenfield had kind of an interesting story. He went to Vietnam, got shot, and got a Purple Heart out of the deal. Comes back to work. This happens. He's out for a while. He survives a head-on collision, barely. Goes back to work. 1989, he's working as a conductor in Brunswick, and I guess his foot went through the stirrup of a boxcar and it chopped off his legs. So, no more of him. He's no longer around. But here's the 7603 at Gaithersburg. So, very exciting, very unforgiving, either way you look at it. So don't mess up on the railroad. This was the dispatcher's fault, though. The crew would have had no idea this was about to happen. The eastbound did have an approach that they didn't expect to have and began the process of slowing the train down. So when they met in the curve, I think everybody was down around 20 miles an hour, and thankfully it wasn't more, because then there definitely would have been fatalities. Okay, if that's enough excitement for you, the chassis system decided, you know what, we should put an operator at Gatesburg every once in a while just to keep an eye on things so that, we're not doing all of this remotely. And so for a period after that, there was an operator, I don't think all the time, I think it's only as manpower dictated that they could scoop up somebody. So we've got this operator, hoop up the orders, paper orders to this eastbound train Summit Avenue. It's 1983. Pretty. Similar shot, not quite. It's almost there. Not quite. Capital Limit coming by the beautiful Ephraim Francis Baldwin designed train station. Looks like a gingerbread house. Here's a helper set, 1981 September. Same thing. Hopefully they have a little bit less issues getting west. Hopefully they have no problems. I don't think they will. Kind of a general overview. We've got the mill, the freight house, the station. This is a helper set that's going to use the hand throw crossover to cross over. And what I like about the sequence, and there's like 5 pictures I think I have. If you do them real fast, it's like a little flip book. It looks like a train's moving. There's the old brakeman standing at the switch, line the helper set through the crossover, and he's going to close up and button him up after he gets it cleared. This is like 1989 or so. Metway local, westbound at Gatesburg. It's a lovely array of 40-foot boxcars with different flavors. It's like Skittles, Taste the Rainbow. 1972 GP9. Pretty classy, pretty enjoyable. B&O Capitol Dome. Yeah. Again, not an exact one-for-one here, but this is still the general layout of the land. No more crossover here. It's straight rail, no more sidings. We have all these nice, expensive apartments and condos now. That's fun. Still have the commercial space in the bar. We've got the train station. Union Pacific leader. This is why I went out there. I heard that 217 was kind of a Union Pacific engine on, so I went out, took a picture, went home. This is circa about 2010. They built a parking garage where the Southern States used to be, so it's really nice to go take pictures. And you can still go up on the parking garage today and shoot pictures. It's a nice place. This tree over here has grown up a lot more now, but you can still kind of get away with it. This is Halloween 1998, westbound with the 6156, the former Western Railroad 4257. Passing the freight house, which by this point is a nice little city museum. Really nice little operation. Cool picture because, again, this era is the era that I remember being a kid and watching trains. 6156, like 17 years almost to the day of this picture being taken. I had this same unit as my lead unit on a westbound Q400 to Brunswick one night. 6156 is still like my favorite absolute engine. It like never had a problem. Still had its chassis rock plow, snow plow on both ends. Perfect engine, never did anything wrong. Worked like it was just fresh from the factory. I love the 6156. So got to run that a bunch at CSX right through my hometown. So that was, your dreams do come true. Move it up to 2011, westbound passing the freight house. Similar, not 100%, but pretty similar. 2011, so we got an SD70, and those kind of went away for a while, and now they've been rebuilt, and they're kind of back out there. So that's Q2 49 or 61 coming back west with the empty auto racks. The train station is kind of like the focal point. Ephraim Francis Baldwin was an engineer that worked for several different railroads, but primarily the B&O, designed a whole bunch of really famous stations. The beautiful station at Point of Rocks. They all look like they're gingerbread houses, just the way they look. It's like a Victorian kind of style. I don't know. This is a 1977, May 1977 photo, and I scanned the slide, and one thing I noticed, like, there's an awful lot of people milling about. They can't all be there for the Amtrak train, which did used to stop. Well, I Google searched the date. Well, May 15th or whatever, 1977 was one of the days that the Chessie Steam Special ran, so no doubt these people came out to watch a steam engine go by. There's kind of the other angle of it, looking east of the station. And if you scroll one more in the old slideshow presentation, it's like you didn't even notice. It's like magic. This is an ink drawing of the train station at Gatesburg, done by Joan Nelson, who later became Joan Reynolds. Mrs. Reynolds lived catty corner to my grandparents, and she had an art studio because she was an artist, believe it or not. So she would give art lessons, and I got voluntold into art lessons. And so I would saunter across on Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. from my grandparents' house to Mrs. Reynolds. And at Mrs. Reynolds, I would draw CSX GP40-2. Because what else are you going to draw? So I would draw CSX GP40-2s. and I would draw CSX GP40-2s, and I would draw CSX GP40-2s, and she goes, Jeff, I get it. There's nothing wrong with what you want to draw. You're very nice, but for the love of God, can you please draw something else? And I said, okay, I can take a hint. So I drew a GP38-2 instead. So, oops.
Toilet water.
Got their money's worth.
Toilet water.
Yeah, I was very particular about the details. So I also, in school, would write stories about trains that I saw and train watching experiences at Gaithersburg. This one's like circa maybe, I guess, 3rd grade. Excuse the penmanship. One trailer train is the trash train. It starts in Shady Grove Metro Station area. You can catch it in Gaithersburg Station around 8:30 a.m. to 6:05 a.m. I must have been a time traveler. Around 3 p.m. the empties will come back, and Mrs. Gray was really impressed, as evidenced by the wow. But if you notice, there's a picture I did at the bottom so she could really get the full effect. I really wanted her to us being there. And we'll notice
Signals.
Summit Avenue, we've got the cantilever crossing signal on the north side of the crossing. We've got a CSX GP40-2 and GP30 mother and slug set, the trash train itself, and the red flag. And if you look at a picture of the real train, here it is at Summit Avenue with the cantilever crossing signal on the north side, the red flag, GP40-2, and a GP30 slug. So I was really drawing what I saw. I mean, you look at this picture that I acquired years later, and it's like, no, this is what I was seeing, and right down to the T. So we have the trash train coming back in the afternoon with the empty trash cars. If we move a little bit further west, we've got Summit Avenue in the distance, where the people have just gotten off of this westbound commuter train with a back-to-back set of covered wagons, which is pretty cool. We got the eastbound siding. That Y I referenced earlier would have been kind of around where the photographer was standing. This is all torn up. This is gone. There's big condos and apartments here. He wants done circa 1987, if you're keeping the score here. 2014, again, at the west end of Gaithersburg, you've got the commuter train leaving town. They've actually built those apartments clear out this way. So where I'm standing would be in somebody's living room right now. So we got the 71 coming west in the snow. And if we kind of go a few steps further west and turn around, we'll look at this eastbound train. Now, notice that it's arcing back here because, once again, eastbound trains are finding that eastbound climb all the way up to Summit Avenue. This is an eastbound grain train at Chestnut Street. The signals are called wards. There's the intermediate signals at wards. The Montgomery County Fairgrounds are off here, yonder, where they still have the fair, and they have the annual Rarity Honor Show every November, which I've invested lots of money buying rarity artifacts. Nice Western Maryland Misty 40 liter, that's always a win. This is September 1980. Again, there's helpers on the rear of this, and it's not included in the presentation, but I do have a companion slide where the photographer took the photo, and then as the helpers went by, I took the going away shot, so I have it's kind of cool. I should have included it, but I got that slide after I put the slideshow together, naturally. So we got this guy, he's struggling up grade. What a sound that must have been. I know, because I spent a lot of time at Wards in this kind of grassy area, and let's go visit that in a second. Chestnut Street again, westbound RDC Bud cars. Thomas and Company Cannery, which was once like the largest canning firm in Maryland or the county or some combination of the two, that caught fire, and they gutted it. Later became commercial space. It still stands. Again, we've got the westbound at Chestnut Street. Now, this is what Wards looked like from the cab a while ago. We still have the B&O signals up, but look, we've got these fugly replacements about to be keyed in. This is from the cab of an eastbound coal train. One day I was on. We're approaching Chestnut Street, lumbering uphill. Spent a lot of my life on one of these things. It's kind of hard to see. There's a car parked here next to the grassy area, and we'll visit that car here in a second, but I want you to put a pin in it. So here's Wards again. Here's the grassy knoll, no relation to the other famous grassy knoll. Eastbound coal train, Wards. There's my grandfather, who carted me out to watch this stuff all the time. So here's our late 90s, early 2000s coal train, lumbering mightily up the grade with a fully loaded coal train, much like the one I just took a picture of from the conductor's seat. Going 2 steps backward, but 1 step forward. Here's my grandparents at Ward's in the grassy knoll, waving to the coal train that I am conducting, circa 2010. So that's my grandmother and that's my grandfather, who had a standing order that anytime I would come through on a train, I had to text or call and let them know. So the end of the show is basically my grandfather. There's my engineer on the trash train, Mr. Corbin Banks, who once Corbin realized that I used to come wave to him, I said, well, I ought to get my grandfather out here. So we used to take him for rides. And so I wish I had more pictures of this, but here's one of the things that Pop came to ride with Corbin and I on the trash train. And they got along really swell. And so that was a really good memory. But so that was me and my grandfather. I was the conductor. This is the trash train, SD40-2. You don't have those on the job anymore. This is like circa 2014 or so. And then the last picture is fall of 2020. I was on an eastbound Q136 that went on the log. We went on the log at Rockville, just east of Gaithersburg. So we had to wait for a cab to come get us. I called them up and said, we're going to be here a while if you want to come play around. So we had Pop on the engine. I'm really glad that I took a bunch of pictures, because about 2 weeks later his driving career ended, and then 5 years later he passed away. So that was October 2024. But he was instrumental in my passion, and we spent a lot of time watching trains together. So all this is kind of all his fault. So I'm really glad to have a couple of these pictures. My conductor took this picture of us on the front of the engine. So thusly, just about concludes. That's the show. That's everything I have to show. So. Well, if anyone has any questions, I'll be more than happy to try my best to answer them. All right, very good. See you later.